All right, let's get this started. Thank you very much to everybody for taking some of their valuable time off of their afternoons and joining us in these conversations. I can't even begin to express how much we appreciate your being here to join us. And it's why we try to continually try to improve the conversations that we bring for you at Truelogic DX so that there's a fresh insight in every conversation. As always, I like to emphasize these are conversations, so you will get out of it what you put in. And so I strongly encourage everybody to drop your questions. The chat box is available for you guys to use at any point in time, especially if we're hitting a topic that is of specific interest to you, and we'll address them at the end of the session. I would also say likewise, advanced thanks to Jason for joining us today. For those that aren't aware, and if we haven't marketed him enough, Jason is the director of new business for ADA. He's a McCann alumnus where he headed digital strategy. He's also been a contributor and consultant for When in Manila. I actually did not know that. Like you work with Jason and with Francis Simsim and Vince Golamco. I did not know that. Uh, he is also a content producer. I have to admit, I'm one of the people that like to follow him. I like some of his more controversial videos.
Thanks, Burns. My YouTube channel, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah. When you post it on LinkedIn, when it's on YouTube, I follow it,
Thank you.
and I'm subscribed to your channel.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think we're lucky to have you, Jason. Thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me. It's always great to share the stage with you again. I mean, we've done this several times, right, in other
Yeah.
conferences, but syempre, online tayo this time.
Yeah, and it does become, a very, I think whenever we can catch each other, it just tends to become a very free-flowing conversation. Like, oh, did you hear about this news about, like, if I want to share geek news about somebody, it's great when there's somebody to talk about it.
Yeah.
So before I start putting you on the spot for some questions, allow me to do a setup. I'm somewhat of a maven, so I like to collect info. And for everybody out there that's joining us, that's a geek like me, or if you're just a digifile, there are some annual reports that for me they sort of make my year, or they make a great start to my year. I'll name a few. The Google and Temasek report, I always look for that every year. The Facebook Bain and Company report, I always look for that. Statista's annual, the CIA World Book. The World Bank releases a Philippine Digital Economy report actually every year. That comes out between October to December. And of course, I think the one that aggregates all the information in one place is the We Are Social and Hootsuite roundup of all digital data for a given year. And things are always easier to appreciate in retrospect and we don't always have time for that, but I will share some of that info. So if you guys will permit me, I will share, I'll grab the screen so I can share some slides with you just for a quick overview. And this is, how we're going to start the conversation. So the first piece of information is, yes, this is a conversation about you guys understanding the changes of your always on customer, but let's look at some changes that Filipinos went through from, through 2020. And they were very interesting changes. And I have to admit, I would be less than genuine if I said digital companies were not at the positive receiving end of all of these changes. So take, for example, 2016 data on the left-hand side, 2020 data on the right-hand side. 2016, our internet penetration was 48. That jumped to 74% in 2020. That's a pretty big adoption rate. The time we spent online, 2016 was actually a big deal year. It was the year marketing.com and a lot of other companies, even Bain and Company made a prediction that digital would surpass traditional in terms of recreational time. And it did, where the average time spent Filipinos spent on was 3 hours 12 minutes. By the end of the year, we were at about 3 hours 45. Today, the aggregate amount of time we spend online is about 10 hours 56 minutes, which is a little nuts. Uh, and I think Jason was sort of spot on when we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago. He was saying that it's probably going to be about 10 hours. So very spot on. Because then the report came out after we had that conversation. 52 million smartphone users in 2016, 71 million, like as of the close of last year. But to me, the most interesting portion is the e-commerce adoption of a lot of Filipinos, where the total e-commerce transactions in 2016 was about 1 billion. This is US dollars. So you're talking back then maybe around 49, 50 billion pesos. And at the close of 2020, we were over 4 billion in e-commerce transactions. The total gross merchandise value we moved electronically in 2016 was only $2 billion. And in 2020, it's 7.5. It almost quadrupled. That's pretty crazy adoption. And this is the new market that we're all waking up to in 2020. Some first time data, right? So people that went online for the first time, did their online transactions for the first time. So according to those reports, 4.2 million additional Filipinos went online for the first time in 2020. And the internet had 16 million new Filipino subscribers, like internet service providers signed on 16 million new accounts through 2020. There are 1.2 million unique new social media users in the country, about 16 million accounts overall across all social media channels. The interesting for me, 19.8 million Filipinos bought something online for the first time, right? In 2020, which is nuts. And uh, $298 million were our first time spends in digital channels in 2020. And so for some of you guys, you might feel that this is my company, right? We were a first time digital. We had our first foray into digital last year. So let's hop on to more of Jason's speciality, which is social. So take for example, 25 to 34 year olds. They're the heaviest users of social media. So definitely not my age range. uh, but 18 to 24-year-olds are the most targeted age demographic. They got 32% of all ad spend, like all ad targeting was spent on 18 to 24-year-olds, even though 25 to 34-year-olds were the heaviest users. And then Filipinos spend an average of 4 hours, 15 minutes on social media. And then on Instagram, 65% of all ad targeting was towards Filipino women versus only 35% to men, right? So, Jason, out of all of these stats, which one jumped at you the most?
All right. I got my clipboard here, so it's serious. I actually think from a if you're a business, right, and you're communicating to consumers, which I think a lot of the participants are, I think the most important or the most significant data point would be the fact that there's a lot of first-time e-commerce users. It tells you a lot of things off the bat. For example, you know that you have a Filipino audience who's more and more willing to do it. The first-time users over the last year, I think it's a function of necessity rather than technological transition. It's necessity. If you're stuck at home and you need groceries, you will be forced to download an app that helps you do that. If you are stuck at home and you can't cook, you will be forced to download an app or order through a website for you to have it delivered. So I think the first time e-commerce users is very significant because not only does it show the market is ready for it, but if you jolt the market, which means you make it a necessity for people to do it, ang dami palang tao, gagawin nila eh. So if you're a business and you've always felt like, is e-commerce right for me? Is e-commerce going to benefit my business? There is a good chance it will. Plus also, we've had over a year of getting people used to the behavior of ordering or buying something online. So I think that's very interesting. The second one would probably be the target demographic. I think as a marketing person, the 18 to 24 demographic, we were talking about this kanina, right? Parang surprising. That's why are businesses spending so much ads reaching these people? Well, primarily because if you get customers early in their spending life, which is the adult age where they have money to spend on brands and products. If you get them early on, the chances of you keeping them as well as loyal buyers throughout their lives is higher. It's diba, if you get somebody buying from your product, buying your products and services at age 20, early 20s, and the experience is relatively good. At bare minimum, it solves their problem or their needs. Then you get to keep that customer when 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, which is a very smart business decision to make. Yeah. So
It's
win
also
them,
a long
win them
play.
early. Yeah, it's a long play. Just like SEO, right? It's a long play.
Yeah, that's true, right? That's true. I'm a fan of long. I'm a fan of the
The
long
long
game.
game. Yeah.
So in retrospect, I think I would want to begin our retrospect coming from the perspective of winners in the industry. Like, who do you feel were industries or brands that were winners through 2020? And on top of that is what did they do right?
Yeah. Winners in terms of brands, I think Gcash deserves a shout out. Transparency, it's a client. So, but what I do like about what they did was prior to the pandemic, they were already providing this cashless and contactless transaction that was so convenient, very affordable as well for most people. So I thought ahead of the curve na nga, tapos poised pa to benefit of a pandemic. Not specific brands, but I think industries that won in 2020. I would say the insurance groups probably won last year. They don't have to emphasize too much that people need protection, right? So I thought they won. Uh, what else? I think businesses that pivoted very quickly did well. I think the supermarkets and the malls that enabled their websites to have an e-commerce component just a month or two after the lockdowns.
Right.
Well done. The restaurants na, diba, the no takeout policy restaurants, medyo may angas pre-pandemic na, we don't do takeouts. If you want to enjoy food at home, either magluto ka ng instant noodles or something. But there were some restaurants that just a month or just a few weeks after the lockdowns, they already instituted their own version of online ordering and online delivery. I think those brands won. Yeah, actually, one of the participants mentioned it. It's Mendocoro and Yushoken. I always felt they're usually my examples actually in my classes because the pivot was so clear and it was against what they were as a brand. Another winner would probably be any company that provided a home-based experience. And I'm not just talking about like travel companies that created home-based like rest or vacation ideas for people, or like cinemas that enable people to watch or book online, but things like furniture companies, diba? Like I want to have like a nice work from home setup here, have a new lamp on the side, mga little things like that. So the companies that adapted to a home-based setup of the customer, I think they did very well.
Right. I think internationally, like take for example for me, some of my samples might be brands like, and you know, I guess it's because they have the financial backing to do it. Like Fitbit adjusted really well to the
Uh,
lockdowns.
uh,
There are new features on the app that created new exercise routines, and then they offered Fitbit Premium for free. You have, I think Nike.
yeah,
They did a fantastic job at just creating all of these programs for their participants.
yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't have the customize your own Nikes in the Philippines yet. But yeah, they did a great job at being able to connect with their customers. I think insurance companies, because there's nothing like a shake up of
You have to
global
remind you, right?
order, right? To make you want to buy the safety product. So that makes sense. Where do you think people should have made key investments, like during the lockdown, right? So some of the brands you talked about, they made just in time or pre-pandemic changes
Yeah.
that poised them to be more successful. But so let's say for the brands that sort of got caught flat-footed, for the businesses that got caught flat-footed by the lockdowns, what should they have invested in then, like during the period of the lockdowns?
Tough question because everything is clearer on hindsight. So we have the
Right,
benefit of hindsight. The shoulda, woulda, couldas. So the shoulda, woulda, couldas would have been investing in your own digital platform. Syempre
mhm,
bias tayo in this world because we
right.
provide digital solutions to
I
clients.
agree.
But it's an inescapable fact that the brands that survived and arguably thrived were the ones where the the relationship and purchase component was unbroken kasi nga available siya, whether or not you have a store,
Right.
whether or not you have a shop, whether or not you have a physical way to interact with people. Kasi we'll learn lessons from the industries naman that suffered a lot last year. You see the hotel industry, they got decimated. You have restaurants
Mm.
decimated. The fitness industry. I'm a part of that because my friends and I were supposed to open a new gym April 2, 2020. So that's like money up in smoke. So those physical experiences that in hindsight, what no, if we thought about like an NTC, I like the Nike training app that you mentioned because I'm a
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in their programs. So the digital platform is very important. I think investment in your own customer data is super important because if you know your
Mhm.
customers, then you know how to focus your efforts. For many businesses that didn't have digital platforms, the approach tends to be very broad, diba? Very shotgunny. You know,
Yeah.
sige, let's talk to as many people as we can. Then let's see
And let's throw everything at the
uh,
wall and see what
strive
sticks.
what sticks. But in a time when you're limiting your reach to people via a laptop or a mobile phone, where diba, that those two screens, everything comes in through there. So how do you compete? How do you catch attention from people? It's very hard. But if you know who you're targeting, you know the specific profile of your best possible customer, then your chances of communicating and cutting through the clutter is much better.
So I want to talk about that since you talked about knowing your audience, and for us, some of the brands that we work with, some of them have really great, mature, well thought out messaging houses, customer personas, but there are some brands that don't have it. So I guess very easy question would be, is it a must, like for
Yeah.
you guys when you help clients set up their campaigns, whether it's a media campaign, it's a social media campaign, is it a must? Like how important is knowing who your customer is? How important is the user persona that you create?
I would argue it's the first thing that we usually look for. Like I'm a comm strategist by trade. So how do you form a communication strategy if you have no idea, diba, who you're communicating with?
Right, who
Sobrang
you're
hirap
talking
nun.
to.
Correct, super
Hmm.
hirap nun. Plus, if you know your persona, your audience profile, the decisions on the platforms, they make the decisions for you. So let's say you're targeting a younger demographic who is into very visual sort of content. Then you know your platforms are very limited na to certain platforms that deliver those experiences. If you're talking to a more wary, careful demographic, only in select areas of a city, then you know that a particular platform or tactic would work naman for them. So if you can answer the who are you talking to question, all the other pieces, I wouldn't say they fall into place, but they fall very nearly into place.
Hmm. You you also mentioned earlier, like when it comes to what they should have paid attention to, and I think this is one of them, right? Being able to understand their audiences. But there were a lot of brands that threw money again, right? Like throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks, right? Like some of them threw it at, okay, so let's hit as many strategies as we can. Let's throw as many creatives as we can. Let's capture as many audiences as we can. But I did want to stick to the audience portion of the conversation where you said one of the things that people should have invested in is being able to capture their audience's information, like being able to build your own audience. And I raise that because I've even gotten asked, like very casually by some people, or sometimes messages on LinkedIn, uh, like the spat between Apple and Facebook. Like, should they, as a business, be worried about that? Right? Just FYI for everybody, the Philippines is a very Android dominated market.
It is.
Uh, but I think you have a really elegant argument for that in the Philippine market. So should Filipino brands be worried about the Apple Facebook spat?
Uh, should they be worried? My answer to shoulds, do parang they shouldn't be worried, but they should take steps to reduce reliance on one particular platform. If there was one
Mm-hmm.
thing that I would always be like preaching in any like lecture or conference or session is the more data sources that you have and the more of your own data sources that you have, the
Right.
better you are to safeguard against being a slave to a platform. It goes without saying na, 'di ba, na most Filipino brands slave ka sa Facebook platform.
Mm-hmm.
It is the platform where most businesses get their first touch of digital, aka your Facebook page, before even
Yeah.
a website, which I don't necessarily agree with. So now, if you've got things like the Apple updates, and then supposedly the incoming Google updates in the next few months or the next year, it gets business panicking. And the reason that these businesses are panicking is over reliance on one source of information, one source of
Right.
data, one source of targeting. So it loops back to, have you invested in your own media, your own digital platforms where you can gather your own data
Right.
points? So, for example, if you have a
Right. Where you have
website,
captive customer data,
yes,
right?
yeah. So, like if you have a website and then you have a sign up form there, badly put, you have a sign up form there, people are signing up and they are in your database, then regardless of what happens in the other platforms, not even regardless, but minimized yung effect. Kasi you have
Mm-hmm.
your list of current customers that you can communicate with after. That's an oversimplification, pero the thought is, if you have your own way of getting your own consumers' information and data, you're minimizing the impact of like a biglaang Thanos stab of
Right.
data
Right.
availability.
So that sort of leads us into the next portion of the conversation, which are, we're going to talk about, like, so changes in behavior. Uh, and before I go into Filipino changes in behavior, did you guys find yourselves having more and more conversations about getting brands to focus their attention on their own websites? Because we did, like, we experienced that. That's a lot of our conversations through 2020, like either change your website, modernize your website, build a website, because we're still having a build your website conversations.
Step one.
Right. But I mean, did you guys find yourself, like, did you guys at ADA find yourselves in the same situation where you still found yourselves telling people, no, you gotta build a strategy too that includes your website, or build a website, or
Yeah.
remake that 1990s website?
So yeah, it's a good question because I came from a world where, and because I teach, I get a lot of those questions too. We're relatively we're relatively safe from questions on should we build, because since we're primarily a data and a tech agency, by the time a client looks for us to begin with, generally they have like some level of digital maturity. So the question is not anymore, do we build a website, but rather, what is the ecosystem that we can build around
Mhm.
these channels that we have? And thankfully, most of them have a primary website. What we're trying to push is not just a website, but does it enable a more complete
Mhm.
experience for your customers, especially e-commerce. E-commerce
Right.
is, I honestly don't want to hear anymore out of the 43 attendees. You please, let's not hear anymore like e-commerce is an emerging trend. It's not, it has emerged many times, many years past. Uh, diba? It's in the emerging trend of
Yeah.
e-commerce. It's not emerging. It is as we've seen in the last 12 to 15 months, it is the norm. So now the debates and the arguments and the push is, can we integrate a complete consumer journey on a digital platform for the customer? I mean, we don't have, we shouldn't have to drive them to an advisor or to a salesperson and then have to go and do a meetup and then see and test the product. Then they go back again to the website to make an order. We want to try and cut a lot of the offline experiences if possible. Some businesses you cannot remove the offline experience, but if we can minimize the steps to get to the sale or to the
Right.
lead, then that's what we want to do for our clients.
Right, because you're easing the friction either of the
Yeah.
acquisition of the lead, you're easing the friction
Yeah.
that leads to the sale, right?
Correct.
So out of the changes between 2019, like actually just the changes through 2020 and still to today, because we're still in it, right?
Yeah.
How did that impact how you guys created strategy? How did that impact how you guys set up campaigns?
As the person who writes the strategies for the businesses, the biggest impact has been yung trying to reach people where we used to reach them. Because the whole offline world experience kind of went out the window. You know? Not completely, but
Yeah.
for the most part. So, for example, we're super proud of the fact that with our customer data, we can have a relatively safe assumption of when people are commuting, when are they going to the office, how many days do they go to a particular city to work before going home to another city. So that's the kind of data that we play around with. And then suddenly you have the vast majority of your audiences no longer moving around so much, no longer going to offline touch points. So yung richness of the customer profile, it it was compromised a little bit. So the biggest impact would have been, now we have to rely completely on digital sources. And it's quite difficult if you're creating 1 year plan, 2 year plan, 3 year plans for businesses, because honestly, we don't really know what's going to happen in the next 6 months, let alone 3 years. I mean, I haven't met someone who can look me in the eye and go, "Oh, what's going to happen in 6 months?" Alam mo ba? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. So it's very difficult to see the future. What we can do though is like minimize risk. We've learned enough in the last 12 months that we can minimize risk. We know now, okay, we're going to be relying on a lot of digital data, but can we enrich the sources of this digital data rather than just relying solely on the Facebook page data, rather than relying solely on your Instagram store data? Are there other places where we can learn about the customer?
Right. So take for example, I think, and it's different per brand and per industry, right? But I think when we try to run campaigns, we always try to make them simulate, or it's like a campaign in the life of consumer
Yeah,
X,
yeah,
right? It's
yeah.
always like that. You try to figure out
Always, yeah. The
when are they
dialogue, day in the life
traveling,
of.
yeah,
Yeah,
right, and then when do they have screen time?
yeah.
And there's a lot of changes. No, like take for example, for us, historically, when we send out emails, when we send out collateral, we try to target the more traditional peak deletion hours. So we try to send our communication after 10 a.m. and
Mm.
before 5, so that people are not in a rush to either mark as unread or delete their mailboxes.
Yeah.
If we send social media content, we'll do it at around 7, either when they're stuck in traffic or when they're home. If you're targeting women, they tend to be online like the last 30 minutes to an hour before they go to bed. So that's about 10 or 11 if that's your target market. And then all of a sudden, like when we're taking a look at our email data, when we're taking a look at our engagement data, we're seeing that the maximum attention we get is like the hour before work, right? Which is super odd because that's not history for us. Now, for us, we're used to seeing the most amount of activity after the first hour of work. So mga around 10 o'clock to noon is a good time for us. And around 3 to 5 is a good time for us. Because
Yeah.
we're B2B, right? So we anticipate they're looking for our services when they're at work kasi their boss told them to look for 3 vendors. Like that's what we anticipate. But today, no, when we take a look at the spikes in our traffic, when people consume our info, they're doing it at the hour before they work. So sometime between the 6 to 8 window, which is highly unusual. And then the post 6 to 8. And then now we even have blips of like 10 o'clocks, 11 o'clocks, which never happened.
Yeah.
And so it just says like everybody has sort of changed. Um, Pero ultimately, kasi when a brand builds a messaging house, diba, they sort of have planned communications and there's a
Yeah.
certain richness to the context of the way comms are built. Did did you guys have to restructure the communication, or is it really was the change just really limited to timing?
There were some changes. I completely get what you mean because my role in my company is also B2B, right? It's the whole
Yeah.
business development thing. But for our clients that are B2C, we did notice that there are some ideas that are no longer constrained by the usual day in a life of structure. So for example,
Right.
for B2C and FMCG brands, for example, you usually load a lot of your content towards the evening or heading towards the weekend. Why? Because you want to be top of mind as people go to the supermarket or the groceries, and then ideally your content is going to be the theory isn't it, but you remind people to buy your product before they go on their weekend grocery shopping. But given that people don't do that, paano? So it made more sense now. You know what? Any time could actually work because they could order it right now. We haven't. Then if you have a link to your Lazada store or another e-commerce platform, then you enable that transaction to happen. From a B2B perspective, what I've found out was that my the way I would usually look for clients would be be at events, those mixers, go to conferences,
Right.
either speak or after the talk. Usually there's like a gathering of the people over
Right.
drinks, uh, and exchange business cards. Now it's so weird. I would literally post links to articles, or I would write something on LinkedIn and I would share that on Instagram. I collabo on Instagram, but there have been leads right via platforms I would have thought, which is like Instagram. Like, no, bakit? But I'm not one to
Right.
question leads. So
Yeah.
it diversified the sources. And my theory there, from a personal standpoint, is that where with a work from home setting, especially for businesses, your work platforms blurred into your social platforms because our work hours blurred into our social hours, right? So as you are
Right.
on LinkedIn with a mindset, okay, this is me, I'm gonna be talking to people who are potential leads. And then on another tab, you have your Facebook. And then on your phone, you have your Instagram. And you're sharing the same content seamlessly to across the platform. So people are
Right.
reaching you across different platforms. So I think if we have attendees who are businesses and they've been isolating their efforts on, let's say, email or LinkedIn, there's actually a lot of merit on maybe exploring other platforms that are not necessarily seen as your usual conversion platforms because you never
Right.
know. Right? There's that
Right.
blurred
Oh, now that
world.
you mentioned that, one of the insights that we've been getting from our own marketing is so take for example, social is not typically my forte. Normally for me, it's very complementary. It's not the bones of how I structure a campaign. Uh, but one of the things that we had learned like through 2019, 2018 is that if you really want to be seen on Facebook, if you want to really be seen on social channels, you have to pay.
Yeah.
I think what we were seeing in 2020 sort of violated that tenet also. Like take for example from our own experience for the Truelogic brand, like when we put out even the content for this, Jason, like a lot of the signups we got were from organic posts on social media. Like just the ones that I would put on my LinkedIn or the stuff that our team would put on our Facebook page and the people that are watching us on Facebook Live now. Majority of them will have been signed up to the organic activity. And if you talked to me 6 months ago, I would have said, no, 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 don't do just organic. It doesn't work. But that's also now sort of flipping on its head. It's just another aha moment, like in the same way when we realized, oh, take a look at what time people are opening our emails and what time they're coming to our website. That's so weird. So
My thoughts.
yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Yeah. I think it's always going to be the medyo cliche answer of the balance. The organically posted content, I would say also from a personal perspective for how I've created content for my company, is it works if you know your audience or your target market look to you intentionally, look for you intentionally. You are a
Mm-hmm.
destination rather than something to be
Right.
discovered. Because if
Right.
your content is designed to be discovered, meaning it doesn't necessarily appeal to like a niche group or a very specific interest group, that one usually you want to boost because you're trying to appeal to a broader,
Right.
I'd say more vague topic or like a theme. But if you have a very specific topic, for example, this one, we're talking about the digital consumer, digitization of how we for businesses. It's a specific interest, and the people who want to attend this, who want to know, want to learn how they can best communicate to this digital consumer. So I'd say if you're an intentional page, intentional business, there's interest where people will go to you versus you needing to push out info. You organic content would be beneficial, which
Mhm.
is what you saw in the results.
Right. And so that moves into like, take, for example, let's talk about adjustments to all of the changes. So I'll start us off with a two-part question. Like, take, for example, okay, adjusting to the disruption, adjusting to the changes. If the people that are joining us are still in the process of adjusting, so take, for example, ABA, you guys yourselves, how did you guys adjust to the disruption? Like, meaning, I think digitally the disruption was good, but to our lives, the disruption was not good. I
I
personally still
agree.
have a hard time walking into an empty office, by the way.
Yeah.
So how did you guys adjust to the disruption yourselves? And then how did you guys find yourselves helping businesses adjust to our new disrupted lives?
Right. It was so weird for me because when I joined the company, it was 2 months before the lockdown, and when the office had a renovation. So whenever people ask me, "Parang, do you miss the office?" I said, "I've never seen the office." The office was being renovated, so during my first 2 months in the company, we were at a co-working space. So I've never seen the office. I should say I miss it. So I think we adjusted well because we're a relatively agile team. We're a little over
Mhm.
30 people, so the organization coordination is a lot easier. The second, I think, is that our product is tech and data. Those things do not necessarily need to be sold or delivered to clients face to
Mhm.
face or in a physical manner because I mean the it's data, right? So it's digital by nature. So our clients who go to us for these products and services, they understand that it's also a digital product. They're working with a digital agency. So there hasn't been like a lot of disruption in the business as usual work. In fact, I'd like to say that over the last 12 months or so, business has been relatively okay for us. So very, very fortunate. The product, I say, was pandemic proof. I think that's how I would
Mhm.
describe it.
Yeah.
It's a pandemic proof product. The disruption happens with the human relationship aspect. For example,
Right.
I haven't met maybe a third or half of my colleagues, right? So we are faces for photographs in a Zoom or a Teams call. The rapport is has definitely been lacking, I would say, because for me, I'm a very social person in general. So the people that I work with, I'd like to be in like a meeting room with them and brainstorm ideas. Make even like making a deck. It'll be nice if like people were in the same room. So hey,
Right.
can I change the slide or hey, can I have some information to put here? So those things I think has is a disrupting factor, especially if your work
Mhm.
style is you're a very collaborative company.
Right. Right. If you draw energy right from a group,
Yeah,
if you draw creativity from a group, it's hard to
and
translate that into
correct.
Zoom.
Yeah, and for a small company like ours, that relationship factor was so important, is so important, and
Mhm.
that's been taken away for no fault of anyone of mine. The third disruption would probably be just I'd say workflow disruption in that it actually takes longer to get a lot of things done.
Mhm.
Things that you can just ask somebody sitting next to you. Now
Yeah.
you've got to
Yeah.
set a 30-minute call.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. This is for me personally, this is the most painful part of the job. Like because every now and then, like I think the biggest part of my job has always been getting consults either from clients or your team, right? Like if they've got a problem that they tried to crack that egg six different times and they couldn't, and so they come to you and said, okay, so here's my problem. Here's how I tried to crack it. Here's how they didn't work. Is there an angle I'm not looking at, right? And so that's a lot of my job. And now, in order for them to get that kind of airtime, whereas in the office they could just walk over and disrupt whatever you're doing, like they'll just tap you on the shoulder and go like, uh, hey, did you feel like having some candy? And I'll go like, no. I'll go like, well, now that I've got your attention, can I have you look at something? Right? And they can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I super agree. What about the clients, businesses? Where did you is there a common theme to where you guys felt you were needing to help them out? No, I'll give an example. Like I think a great example of one of the things you pointed out is in our industries the product is it's a bit future proof. It's pandemic proof. In fact, I think we were its beneficiaries. um so but what about for industries that where the physical contact is a must, right? Like take for example cars, right? I think car salesmen are great
Yeah.
when they can see
Yeah.
you, right?
Yeah.
And an experience is a car is in a car is terrific if you can
Yeah.
touch it.
Yep.
So how about like take for example that?
Good one because we have a car client, and the crazy thing is that 2021 is poised to be a very very promising year for the
Mhm.
car industry. My dad also works in the automotive industry in the States, and he was telling me that he has not been able to take a single day of leave in 2021 because the car
Wow.
industry is the bounce back in the automotive industry is crazy for many
Right.
many different reasons. From health to safety to convenience and lower prices, syempre. One of the problems that we have identified is tama. It's a product that the sale is more or less done after the test drive. That's a fact
Right.
of life in
Right.
the automotive industry. So knowing that problem, the challenge is okay. How do we make test drives easier? How do we make it more convenient? Because the test drive cannot be removed from the car buying experience. I don't
Right.
think it's one of those. It is shoes to buy. Shoes are better if you buy them at the store, but if you buy them online, pwede na.
Yeah.
Cars aren't like that. You can't
Yeah.
okay, yung size ko sa cars ganito. No, it doesn't work that way for cars. Diba? So if you cannot remove a physical aspect of the business, can you make every step leading to it as seamless, as easy, as great, as enjoyable as possible? So the name of the game is okay. We can remove the test drive. Can we make the sign up very very fast? Can we get the leads
Mhm.
as quickly as possible to the salespeople? Can we train the salespeople so that they're more adept at writing emails or responding to Facebook messages?
Mhm.
Can we can you automate a lot of the engagement that happens on social media when
Right.
people
Can you
are
ease the
displaying
friction of
interest?
scheduling an
Yeah,
actual
it's
test
about
drive?
correct. It's about easing that friction. Kasi the test drive cannot be removed. Let's make na lang every step leading to it. The the ones that we can affect digitally.
Mhm.
The ones that we can affect. Let's improve the experience as best as we can.
So through 2021, where do you feel is the next level up, next big leap in terms of how people should adjust to digital? I think the one thing that people should always anticipate in digital is it doesn't matter how good your provider is, you will adjust, right? Digital is always changing. I don't think we have
Mm.
ever recommended the same strategy to the same
Yeah,
client 2 years in a
correct.
row.
Yeah.
Uh, so where do brands and businesses step up their game through 2021?
Mga prediction questions na.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And then I'll have you again this time next year so we can do a retrospective.
Oo nga, no? Okay, mali ako dito. Tama dito. Uh, if you are a business that was relatively okay in 2020, that means your digitization was probably okay. Your next level up would now be, were there great experiences that you could amplify pa some more?
Mhm. Right.
So for example, the very simple challenge of delivery. Delivery is, we have accepted a certain standard, but can it be improved? What else? Your apps. If you have an app, if you have something that can be done in 5 steps, can you do it in four? Can you do it in three?
Right.
So the level
Right.
up, I'm while I'm a big fan of like big disruptive moves, I'm also because I am a small business owner. So I want also to focus on small little improvements.
Right.
If your businesses, for the attendees especially, if your businesses can have that one or two little improvements that have a compounding experience-based effect, I think you definitely understand what needs to be done in digital. And the second is that you are leveling up in the best way you know how, which is providing a better experience
Right.
for your audience. Simple things, if it took you 2 hours before to reply on Facebook, with a chat bot, now you can respond in five
Right.
seconds. Little things, don't go for the big ones
Right.
all the time. Sometimes the little
And
things
yeah,
do the
and
job.
learn from the little misses that you make, right? Like one of the
Yeah.
brands that I think made a just-in-time digital transformation was LBC. We started working with them in 2019, and the pandemic hit like right as the work we did matured. So good for them. They were actually a big winner. Also in the lockdowns, their traffic soared like crazy, like it more
I
than
can
doubled.
imagine.
Yeah, they more than doubled. Um, but the pain point from their customers' perspective was people have the ability to, like, people still think they need to go to an LBC in order to drop something off, like I say, it's a parcel, right?
Yeah.
But what they don't realize is they can either book their schedule to go
Yeah.
to the store where they've got a different queue, or they can get somebody from LBC to pick it up,
Pickup.
right?
Yep. I use the pickup.
Do the delivery. Right, right. And so, but what we found in their data was their pickup process is like 5 steps. Like there are 5 interactions before you can schedule your pickup, or before you can schedule a pickup, or before you can schedule a drop off. And in their new app, in their new technology, which is the LBC Online, they reduced that down to three. The reduction of friction, just 2 steps, 2 button click reduction, got them from 10,000 to 1,000 conversions to 10,000 to 3,000 conversions, right? Just removing 2 steps got them tripled the number of conversions that they were making in the end, and that's per 10,000. Uh, and so that's an example, I think, of people reducing friction. Uh, I will bring up the topic of, like, let's say, persistent changes. No, one of the things that I think, although grain of salt, of course, Google is very self-serving when they say this, and it was from their own survey. Like in the Economy Philippines report for 2020, they mentioned that they ran a survey to find out how people feel about their lockdown behaviors and whether they would persist. And essentially, in their survey, they found that 95% of respondents said that their online behaviors are likely to persist. I think to a degree that's true. I
Yeah,
may
I
not
agree
be
with
to the
that.
same frequency, but I think it will. It, but I think that's pretty true. Like if there are two deliveries to my house every day today, it will probably go down to one delivery a day. Like after this normalizes. But I think the days of that doorbell being quiet for days on end is like gone by.
Oh yeah.
We're not gonna go back to that. Where do you feel certain behaviors will persist after the recovery? Like after all of this, it becomes history. What behaviors do you think will persist?
The big one I think is e-commerce and online banking. Big one
Mm,
is not two things pala. Buying online and I think buying online is the big one. If you are used, if, how do I say this? You're parang in any kind of marketing landscape exercise. Once you have a critical mass of people who are used to a particular execution or a
mm,
tactic or an effort from a business or a brand, may sanay factor. So if people are used to do this, this will become the norm. Things like I haven't lined up in a bank. In I
right,
probably lined up in a bank once in the last 14 months. I would never want to do that again because now I can do transfers across
right,
different banks, different apps via my either GCash or bank to bank. Things like ordering groceries. I think those are going to persist. Another one would probably be the work from home situation. Just
mm-hmm,
while some of my conversations with some of my clients, I asked them, why are you guys going to the office? And generally the reason is sayang yung office space or invest ng company. And I'm thinking, you know what? There will come a point where businesses will look at their books and think, you know what? Yung rent natin is one of the most expensive things on our
yeah,
books. If we can remove this, my internet, there are people have computers at home, and more people are setting up work from home areas in their homes. It might actually be on the norm rather than the exception. I have a feeling. In fact, I
mm-hmm,
would put myself out there and say and predict that as companies figure out that this work from home thing works, a lot of the thought based industries are going to remain either permanently work from home or majority of the work hours spent at home.
Right, right. I think as an example, Truelogic and our parent company, I think we're pretty decided as an executive team that we are probably going to be on a mixed working arrangement, like moving forward, like even post vaccination, post pandemic, post lockdown, where I think the priority for the infrastructure in the office, because I have to admit the perks of the infrastructure in the office, like your internet here is never spotty, like never.
Yeah.
There
Oh
are
God,
three
I miss
dedicated
the office.
fiber optic connections.
Yeah.
There's a generator, right?
I
So
miss
I
the
don't have
free
to worry
coffee.
about a power outage. Then there's that, right? I just keep pouring it because it's still, I mean, it's still here. So, but when we do ask to come back, there will be a bias, a priority towards frontliners, decision makers, and job roles that are highly collaborative in nature. Like those are probably what we'll prioritize. And for all other jobs, it will probably come when you need to arrangement, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you're getting cabin fever in your house, sure, there's an office. If and I think
Yeah.
that will be the arrangement for a lot of businesses. Uh, so I think for the people that elect to stay from home, their behaviors will definitely persist. So before we run out of time, I'm going to hit some of our lightning rounds because I do want to get your opinions on some potentially controversial,
Oh
I would
no.
say ads. No, so the first one is easy. I asked Jonas this question: TikTok, what's your take on it? Like as a channel, as a platform?
I think it's very exciting. It's a great new channel for exploration. But if you're a business that's relatively new and digital, I'd say invest your money, brains, and time on the proven stuff before going
Mhm.
experimental. And I mean, it's still relatively new, so there's not a ton of case studies out there on how to use it. So I'd say if you're measure established and you've got a good spread of digital platforms, you're doing well on your current fundamental digital platforms, go ahead, explore.
Right. Arsicola, what's your take on that ad by Gigil?
First of all, the creative chops on that ad is like through the roof and through the stratosphere. I'm like, when I first saw it, I'm like, medyo yung mga, in guitar, right, the face melters, para
Right.
siyang face melters. So I think though, what a lot of people do get wrong is that, because I've been lucky enough to have been part of campaigns that not that crazy, but pop culture worthy
Right.
conversations. I think what a lot of people are missing out, especially in like brand business conferences, that not every brand can do that. Ha?
Yeah.
Brands that are usually legacy brands, established, it's very hard to rock the boat. While
Mhm.
it's tempting to do so, your customers, your shareholders, they have a certain
Right.
expectations of what thresholds and limits are. So that works for businesses that want to rock the boat, have the personality to rock the boat, and have a almost like a business need to be talked about, because at the end of the
Right.
day it all boils down to what's the business need. And if your company has not been on the surface or top of mind for a while, those kinds of stuff are amazing for you in terms of top of mind
Right.
awareness.
I also think kasi RC Colas works because it's consistent with what their brand archetype is, right? So they
Oh,
can afford to be a jester, right? Can afford
irreverent
to
sila
be
eh.
somewhat rebellious. They can afford to be somewhat radical because they are sort of like an outsider. They're not mainstream. The
Yeah.
Julie's Bake Shop ad, like did you see that? The
I
no
did, I
ticket to
did,
gaming ad. Okay, so
I
what's your
did.
take?
Isa pa yan na, whoa, So I think it's one of those pieces that, yeah, I would mention along the same line. It creates good conversations around a brand that generally they will not be talked about in either
Right.
in casual conversations or pop culture. Kasi on a regular day, we'll talk about your household brands. But then if you're not a household brand, how do you get into that space? So content that it is a conversation starting style content. So I think, yeah, very, very well done.
And now I think we'll make room for some of the questions that have been coming in, and I'll
We
just
have a few
read some of them. So the first one was, what's your opinion on Viber communities?
fiber communities.
Should businesses be pursuing this as a channel or is it a nuisance?
every channel has the risk of becoming a nuisance if you overdo
Right.
it, and if you have a non-stop stream of communications in a one way. I think Viber communities are useful if, number one, your audience is on Viber. That's the minimum requirement.
Right. Right.
Number two is if you have an exclusivity angle for people to want to be part of that Viber community.
Right.
Because if there's no exclusivity angle, like there's no specific reward or benefit, either tangible or intangible for me, and na hindi ko naman mahanap ko naman on Facebook or your website or your whatever platform, why would I add another way for you to
Right.
communicate with me? So use it in a very tactical way, and I think it
Right.
still makes sense for businesses.
Right.
Top of mind example, I think Krispy Kreme is a good example of a brand with a Viber
Right.
community. They have a very specific content plan and a very specific promos as well that they share on their Viber
Yeah.
community.
Personally, for me, the groups that I follow are Nike and Adidas. Like I follow them both, you know. But what I liked about their approach was they don't pay to acquire you into their Viber community. When you hit a
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
store, like incidentally, like when I do my chores, if I have to go to the grocery and then there happens to be an Adidas, there's a QR code there that says join our community for exclusive offers, special
Yeah.
sales, and whatnot. So there's a hook, right?
Yep, exactly.
Right. So the store, the Nike and the Adidas stores near the place where I live, which is in the Katipunan area, they had those, and I was just curious, really, like, oh, Viber community marketing. I want to see what that's like, right? So I snap the QR codes, and I'm part of the community. I'm taking a look at the messaging, but I will say they have gotten me to buy like two and two for each one. So I think it's effective. Like I don't think the messaging is mistargeted. Like some of it
Right.
isn't for me, but you know the ones that are really good, like save 30% off or 50% off on a 9 grand Nike shoe. Why not?
Why not? I actually, yeah, actually, I'm waiting for my Adidas delivery today. Got some football jerseys. 30 off, eh?
See?
For me
Yeah,
naman, it's
yeah.
app alerts.
Right, right. So you see, and there's that, right? So to me, I think those are I think you're right when they're done the right way. What I liked is by giving you a QR code and giving you the option to be part of the community or
Yeah,
not. It's permission marketing.
correct.
That's
Willingness
what I
is
liked
there.
about the approach, right? So another question is it wise to cast a wide net and chase customers across all channels? Uh, uh, because I guess you're saying if the customer behavior has changed, is it still wise to cast a wide net and chase your customers across all social channels?
Or is that a question for me?
Uh,
Uh,
well, yeah, I guess it's because it's they're talking about social channels. So the
Social
wide net
media.
approach to different social media channels, is it still the way to go?
I'm in the school of thought where I would rather that a business is very, 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 very good at one or two platforms, maybe three,
Mhm.
versus being half-hearted on nine different platforms.
Right.
The reason you want to do that is if you have nine different platforms. My first question to you is: do you literally have the content plan to produce enough output across the
Right.
platforms? And usually the answer is no. The second there is that your audience base is probably going to be in two to three platforms primarily. So you should be concentrating your efforts on those two to three platforms. The other consideration that you want to have is that wide nets are great if you're the kind of business that need massive awareness. But I would rather that your wide net is cast on those two to three platforms versus
Mhm.
across all platforms. Because
Right.
if you can focus your efforts on platforms where your customers are, then you increase the chances of once they know you're a brand that exists, the chances of converting them is also much
Right.
higher because you're where they are.
It leads in actually to the next question, and I think it's from a different person that says, "What's your advice on capturing the attention of a niche market that you'd like to tap?" No, and she said that their specific vertical, their industry is they sell herbs and spice plants.
Spices, yeah.
Right.
So with any niche market, it's identifying your focus audience, like who are the kinds
Mhm.
of people who are interested in herbs and spices. And you might be surprised if you do a little bit of a deep digging that your initial thought of who your audience is different from the reality. Another one is when you're a niche market, most often niche markets, they find that one niche audience and then they stop. No way, there are secondary and tertiary niche audiences. So think about the other, think about customers who might be recruited into this niche. Are you talking to them already? What about pre-existing communities? Can you communicate with them as well? So
Right.
this is where your focus on 2 to 3 platforms can come into play, because niche interest groups tend to congregate in very specific platforms. A good example, like the watch industry, heavily in Instagram, now starting to invade TikTok. And you've got shoes, the sneakerheads, right? Heavily on
Yeah.
YouTube and Instagram,
Right.
also start, diba? So there's very specific platforms where you can start looking for your niche target.
Uh, online fatigue and ad fatigue. Is it myth or
Uh,
real?
oh, it's real. It's definitely real. I in my CDM class, I call it wallpaper marketing. You know how when you have a new phone or a new laptop, for like the first week you notice the wallpaper, and then 2 years later you've
Yeah.
never changed your wallpaper because
Yeah.
it's part now of your background. I think it is a real thing. Now that's why content that do not look like ads work. It's a very broad stroke statement. No, content that doesn't look like ads. But one of the ways to do it so that it doesn't look like ads is think about what kind of narrative your audience is looking for. Are they looking for a product, or are they looking for an idea to solve a
Hmm.
problem? It just so
Right.
happens that your product solves it for them. Things like insurance companies. They are not a lot of the content, love them or hate them, they work for their brands because they don't sell you insurance. They sell
Right.
you feelings of fear, worry. They sell you
Right.
positives naman like
Security. Right. They sell
security,
security.
reassurance. The idea that if, knock on wood, something happens to you, your family is going to be fine. They sell that idea, but the enabler of that is the product, which is
Right.
insurance. Same thing
Right.
with the car
I super
industry.
agree.
But the great car ads of the last few decades, they never really come out and say, this is the car, ito yung gas mileage, ganito, ganito. No, it's about how do you feel when you drive that car?
Right.
How do you,
Right.
diba? What are you doing for planet Earth by driving a Tesla?
Right. I was telling people that, no, that like when you feature an ad, I think because cars are primarily sold to men, like as a market, I think because cars are primarily sold to men, it's okay to have a billboard with just the car because that's enough for a guy to dream. But I also told people, but if you're putting something on social media, if you're trying to move somebody emotionally, then show the photo of a dad handing the keys to a brand new car to a son, right? that's
Yeah,
that's one, or somebody getting into their first car, or a young family making their first purchase. But the external look is more an awareness, information, super top
yeah.
funnel experience. That's not an emotional experience.
Exactly. My
uh,
so my dad was sharing with me some stuff that was happening in the automotive industry in the States. And it was telling me that the reason why the moment you get somebody in the test drive, 50% sold na yan. The reason
yeah.
is in the vehicle, you start you start asking the person imagining you start asking the person to imagine that they're
Yeah.
driving the car off. You start
Yeah.
asking him to think, I know you don't really like the silver color, but it's available in red. Think about how you'd look when you're on I-95 in this red
Right.
Mustang.
Right.
So
That's
may
a sales
mga
technique, right? It's called
sales technique.
visualization. It's a sales
Yeah,
technique.
visual. So parang and it's not about selling the car products or the customization,
Right.
but you're selling the. Can you picture yourself driving this? Smell it.
Right.
Diba? Parang
Right.
you want
The
that. So
idea of you in the future
yeah,
having this experience
exactly.
every day is really what you're selling.
Exactly.
So you're sort of selling them a better vision of their future.
Yep. So
Uh,
if
uh, yeah, go for it. Because I've got a few other questions. But you were going to say,
no, let's go for the questions.
okay. So someone says I'm in the high end real estate market. How do I find out where these people are and how to reach them?
Oh yeah, I see this from anonymous attendee. We've created business plans for high end real estate brands, and with the higher end real estate brands, you're talking to several target markets at once. And I think the biggest mistake that, and I think I can confidently say this because I train real estate people on
Mhm.
social media too. the biggest mistake that I see is that you have a set target market and you don't deviate from it too much. I'm not saying you, but the industry at large, where if it's high end, dapat ang kausap natin people who can afford this. That's not the only way to do it, you know. Because you want to also plant the idea on a person who might be able to afford this in the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Real estate is a long purchase.
Right.
It's got a long purchase journey. So, and I don't want to like, you probably, you know how to do this much better than I am, but in terms of the digital communications aspect, you have to expand how you see a target market. For example, people with rich parents, very simplified, they might not reflect in the data or the way they dress or the way they communicate. They might not reflect a target market for real estate high end, but they are actually able to be purchasers of the property. Now, can you communicate to them in a way that makes them want to tell that to their dads or to their ninongs or
Right.
their grandpa that, oh,
Right.
for my first condo, can I get from this developer? Mukhang okay based on what I've seen on social media.
Yeah.
Another target market are upgraders. I know real estate agents already reach out to upgraders, but there are layers of upgraders as well. There are people who are upgrading locations. There are people
Mhm.
upgrading developers. There are
Size,
people
right? Also size.
size. So there are many ways to cut your target audiences. And then another target market that you could be looking at would be ang dami ng niche, no? Parang you've talked about two to three already. So
Yeah.
another layer of target market that you could start thinking of are people who are demographically older, but they're not buying it for investment. I think that's one. I first learned this when I was buying my property, this condo.
Mhm.
Every single broker that was talking to me is talking about freaking investment. I'm not gonna sell it. I'm gonna live
Yeah.
in it. So I don't want to hear that. And if I want to buy an investment, I'm gonna buy honestly. I'm gonna buy like five crappy condos, the Papa Red at crappy prices, because that's investment for me. Diba?
Right.
But the one I want to live in, it's not investment. It's a liability.
Right.
Anyway, getting ahead of myself. So what if you could talk to an old, demographically older people who are not looking for investments, but they're looking for something to gift to either
Mhm.
kids, family members, etc. So
Right. A daughter that's getting married.
so the all of these long-winded niche examples is to kind of make you think differently about the messaging, the communication. Every property developer that I've seen an ad for in the last 9.5 years, it's the same photo, 2 kilometers away, makikita mo yung building, shot at night, para kita yung lights. Do people buy property like that? Or do they want to go to the village? Do they want to open the door, hear how it creaks when you open it?
Right.
Do they want to envision, okay, yung lounge chair ko dyan nakalagay. Tapos I want my
Right.
TV here. Do they want to
Right.
envision living there? Do they want to envision their kids living there? Do they want to envision their parents living there? Do they envision themselves settling roots in that place? Do they envision themselves working in the area where your property is? Because if these are questions that you can answer, the way you communicate your high-end property changes. Take a page out of the luxury watch market where the communication is very rarely about the specs of the watch. Specs by
Mm.
specs, my quartz swatch will beat everything else, right? But if you talk about success, milestones,
Like
emotions,
achievement.
engineering, achievement,
Right.
ano pa ba? Part of a very exclusive club of 400 owners of this.
Precision is what they talk about, right?
Yeah, diba? So it creates that desire for something na honestly, diba, peso for peso, hindi naman siya equal but as with any high end, you're selling an emotion or at least that desire
Mhm.
versus the product
Right.
itself.
Right. And I think the higher end a product or service is, the more invisible, the more intangible the what you really sell is. You have to realize that the whatever it is, it's the commodity. It's not the product. The condo is not your product, right? The
Yeah,
product is whatever messaging also goes around with it.
exactly.
Okay, and we're just about out of time. I want to thank everybody that's thrown in. I've actually got a couple more questions in, but we've already gone over time, and I do want to respect everybody's time here. If you've got more questions, throw them at us. We'll throw them at Jason for some advice, or we'll answer them ourselves if we can. I want to thank Jason for joining us this afternoon. It was a
Thanks for
great
having me.
convo. The hour went by so fast.
It did. Yeah, it really, really did.
Yeah. And I'll invite everybody again, like join us again for the next conversation. Thank you also very much to you guys that are joining us for taking the time to join in this conversation. Till the next conversation, Jason, thank you. Truelogic team, thank you. And to everybody that's joining us, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.